Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Nick Suplina, Senior Vice President at Everytown for Gun Safety.
Thanks for having me.
Unfortunately, every time you and I talk, it's after a tragedy. This time is no different. We're at the start of the school year, and we have already seen a school shooting. This time in Georgia, 2 students and 2 teachers are dead. What's your reaction?
Well, you know, I'm shocked, but again, this is too common in this country, and the facts of this case are just too familiar. Um, we are reeling with the community in Georgia over another senseless shooting that could have been prevented, by the parents involved, by better laws on the books. And we are, committed to taking the action necessary to make sure this doesn't happen again. We're going to continue to take those steps. But the fact of the matter is it never, as a parent of 2 teenagers who you send off to school, you expect them to come home. You should expect them to come home in America in 2024, but sadly, that's not the case.
A theme that you just noted, a theme in all of our conversations have been this is too common and it is preventable, which is just heartbreaking to hear about a tragedy like this. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk first about Georgia and the gun laws there. Did the laws on the books in Georgia make this crime easier to commit?
I mean, there's just no question. There aren't very many gun laws on the books in Georgia. It, I believe, is in our national survey ranked 46th, as in 4 from the bottom, for the loosest, weakest gun laws in the country. And Georgia lawmakers have had a number of opportunities to act and have either refused to act or literally gone in the wrong direction. First and foremost, Georgia lacks a child access prevention law or a secure storage law that would require firearms to be securely locked, especially when there is a child in the home, and where gun owners would face culpability if that law was broken. Georgia also lacks a red flag law, precisely designed for where there are worries that somebody poses a risk of harm to themselves or others, to temporarily remove firearms from the household while you can assess the situation and make sure that everybody can be safe, and then return the firearms as needed on the back. Georgia does not have that law. That perhaps could have been used in this case when the FBI appeared at the doorstep not that long ago, but couldn't really move further with the case. And then lastly, it's about the weapon. Assault weapons like an AR-15 used here are incredibly deadly. They're very easy to use, including by a 14-year-old, to just extraordinarily devastating effect. And Georgia does not have a ban on assault weapons. So those are some policies that leap to mind from the facts here that might have prevented it. And what we've seen in states that have these laws, we see lower incidence rates of children accessing firearms, of mass shootings, of suicide and self-harm. So we know the laws work. Georgia needs to catch up.
Let's talk about the second component of this that could have been preventable. The father, in a historic moment, was charged in this case. The suspected shooter's father was charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter, 2 counts of second-degree murder, and 8 counts of cruelty to children. What's your reaction to this, and do you think these charges go far enough?
Well, these are very serious charges, and as you suggested, are relatively rare in the context of these types of mass shootings, but not unheard of. We saw in Oxford, Michigan, just earlier this year, a jury return a verdict on involuntary manslaughter on multiple counts against the parents of the school shooter there, in part because of the way the parents both ignored warning signs and enabled access to firearms irresponsibly. Here, unimaginably, I think, to the parents out there that are probably watching this, a father, months after the FBI came to the house and said, "We believe your son has made threats against his school online," purchased an AR-15 for his son as a present. That's the definition of irresponsibility, both as a parent and gun owner, you must be held to a higher standard than that. And so I think these charges will, will meet the moment in holding the father accountable. And I think we have a lot more to learn about the situation in that home that led to this tragedy.
Do you think that holding a parent responsible, because as you mentioned, we did see this in the Crumbly case earlier this year, do you think holding a parent responsible in a school shooting will deter future incidents?
I think it's helpful, but probably not sufficient. It's helpful because parents, including good people who want to do the right thing, don't always draw the lines and connect the dots between the decisions in the home for how they store their firearm and a tragedy like this. Nobody really thinks, oh, this is going to happen in my household. Whether we're talking about a child committing an act of mass violence, or a child committing suicide by gun, or a child unintentionally hurting somebody in the home with a firearm. You don't think about that. And certainly the folks that are selling guns by the barrel don't want you to think about that. They want you to think of a firearm as the thing that's going to make your home as safe as it possibly can be. Well, you're introducing risk into the home. Cases like this help tell that story. I think it does matter. I think parents who are gun owners do take notice and maybe do change their practices. But we know historically there are over 4.5 million children living in a home right now with an unsecured loaded firearm, at least one, and that just is unacceptable. So I think prosecutions like this do send a message. I do hope parents who are gun owners receive that message. But we have a lot more work, both through law and education, to make sure that those guns, if you're bringing one into your home, are properly and securely stored.
Let's talk about that work that needs to be done, because according to the Gun Violence Archive, there have been over 380 mass shootings this year to date. This is a problem that affects every single community across the country. So what do you think needs to be done now to prevent these mass shootings from happening?
Yeah, I mean, my short answer, and not to be glib, is like everything. We need to do everything we can across the country, across society, to bring these numbers down, to stop these incidents. And it starts with gun policy, in my view, that I've talked about already. There is so much we can do at the state level and at the federal level to keep Americans and our communities safer from gun violence in all of its forms, whether it's a shooting at a school, at a barbecue, on the street corner, or in the home itself, right? There are laws designed and proven through evidence and science to prevent these acts from happening. We need to do them at scale. We need them federally. We need them in every state. That's the number one thing. But I think that there's a lot more that we can do to the point of parental responsibility and education. We can do a lot to educate gun owners and communities more generally about the risks of firearms ownerships and the importance of responsible gun practices. So, for instance, this was a school shooting. Across the country, we have had millions of students receive notices, students backpack home notices from their schools about the importance of secure firearm storage. Just like a school might inform parents about an outbreak of the flu or other public health or public safety notices, gun storage has to be part of it, because 3 in 4 school shooters obtain the gun from the home of a family or a relative, right? So the way you store a gun in your home could impact the school community. The school community has an obligation to inform families of that risk and do their part. And I could go on and on. There's really so much that we can do, whether legislative or about our practices or in public education. We need to do it all.
President Biden passed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, or he signed that into law a little bit over 2 years ago. That was touted as the most meaningful gun legislation that was passed in decades. So do you think that goes far enough? And A, and B, what else needs to be done today when it comes to lawmakers?
Well, at the federal level, there's no question the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act was the most significant legislation in a generation, and it did a lot, but it did not do enough, and we knew that. It was a compromise bill. Notably, however, and in a sign of progress, right, this was a bipartisan bill, as the name suggests, but it got 15 Republican senators to vote with it, right? That's important because that's an acknowledgement that inaction is just not a possibility anymore. It's just not an option. If you want to keep your job in Washington, it's not an option. It took significant measures kind of across the gun policy landscape, but didn't go as far as it maybe should have. It only went as far as it could politically in that moment. We need to reinstate the federal assault weapons ban. The president has been quite clear that he would sign that bill if it hit his desk. We think it would save countless lives and reduce mass shootings and mass shooting casualties tremendously. I think we need a federal red flag law. Right now, red flag laws have been state to state, but there is a possibility of a federal red flag law or the types of federal guidance that could help really bring state laws into being. And BISCA, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, did do that to some extent, allowing for funding for states with these laws, but we need to go further. There needs to be a federal solution. And finally, what about a federal secure storage law? Again, the rights of gun ownership have to come with responsibilities, and that responsibility could be codified in a law. If you have a gun in the home, especially with a child in the home, you have to securely store it. It is a small price to pay for your safety, for the safety of the community around you, and I think it should be the law of the land. Lastly, I'll say, and President Biden does speak to this quite frequently, one party that often gets left out of the responsibility discussion in the wake of a tragedy like the one we saw this week in Georgia is the gun industry itself. The gun industry is making money off of the sale of AR-15s and is making money off of guns that are quickly diverted into crimes. And they largely avoid responsibility in the courts because of federal immunity in the form of the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, which was passed in 2005. That law needs to be significantly changed, if not gotten rid of altogether, because the gun industry is making a profit off of this public health crisis. It's making it worse. It could take steps to improve it, but it isn't. So that is one area of accountability that I think is sorely lacking and that needs to change.
As you know, it is an election year. We're 2 months out from November. And unfortunately, every time these situations happen, within hours, the conversation does turn political. So how important do you think this is on the ballot this year, gun issues specifically? And how different is a vote for Kamala Harris versus a vote for Donald Trump when it comes to gun issues?
I mean, the choice is night and day. There's no question that Vice President Harris, who has led the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention since it was created just about a year ago, has been a leader on this issue as vice president and before, is a staunch proponent of gun safety laws. And for those that watched the Democratic National Convention, gun safety laws were featured heavily because, A, the Democratic Party cares deeply about this issue and solving this issue, and B, they know that it's good politics. They know that the very voters that are going to decide this election, moderates, independent voters, suburban voters, right, they care about gun violence prevention. They care about gun reform. They're going to vote on it. I think it is going to play a role in this election. And I don't think Donald Trump or his vice presidential pick, J.D. Vance, are meeting that moment. They are instead, J.D. Vance was on record just the other day saying school shootings are a fact of life. Donald Trump kind of boasted to the NRA at its recent convention that during his time he did nothing on guns, despite being under a lot of pressure. I don't think that resonates with the American people. Poll after poll after poll shows extraordinary majorities supporting gun policy. And so I do think it will matter. I do think it's a factor at the ballot box. if you are somebody who cares about this issue, who wants to be able to say goodbye to your kids in the morning and feel confident that they're not going to face a tragedy at school, there's a pretty clear choice to be made, and that's for Kamala Harris.
Nick, I always appreciate our conversations, even though every time they happen in the wake of tragedy. But I really appreciate you coming on again. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's good to be here. Great to talk to you. Thank you.